I'm Summer Falgiano, and you're tuned in to Badasses in Tech. Today, we're joined by Unify ID founder and CEO, John Whaley. In this episode, he explains how his company is reinventing user authentication, along with his take on the evolution of consumer privacy.
My background's maybe a little bit atypical for being a startup CEO. I started off in academia. I did my PhD at Stanford, in computer science, and I was planning to be a professor. That's where that was my plan and my intent. What had happened was I kind of fell into entrepreneurship. I had we were working on a research project at Stanford. Vinod Khosla, who is founder of Khosla, founder of Sun Microsystems, Khosla Ventures, etc. He heard about our project, and then we went to meet him. I mean, the only reason I knew him is because his photo was outside of my office at Stanford, and we weren't even really thinking about starting a company at that point. And then, he basically gave us a term sheet that says, here's $3 million, go do something cool. And so we thought that was a nice opportunity. And so jumped at that, and then just really haven't looked back since then. That was back in 2005. Started my first company that out of Stanford there. It was before I had graduated. I did eventually go back and finish my degree and finish my PhD. I did get my PhD. And then I went back and teach to Stanford for a couple of years there as well. So had my first company from 2005 that eventually got acquired in 2015. Then started my next company in 2016, which is my current company, Unify ID.
Very cool. You mentioned that you had an atypical background and you started in academia. I'm interested to understand, do you feel like, how do you feel like that background set you apart from folks who maybe started their entrepreneurial journey from a different way? I got some feedback. My first company, I was a CTO. It was very much kind of a technology focus. My second time around, I was doing this as CEO, and I got some feedback saying, early on, saying, maybe you want to take off the PhD off of your business cards because people may think that you are, a little bit too academic, a little bit too ivory tower, not that practical, these kind of things, and because there was a vision of a startup CEO being like, okay, well, it's important to be, good at business and good at sales and these type of things. And, I thought about it. But then I thought, I spent all these years doing this, and this is honestly who I am. And and so rather than try to pretend to be somebody that I'm not, it was more like, let me lean into the things that I'm good at, which is, I come from that academic background, and that and then number one, it allows me to be more authentic and more confident. And when I'm talking to people and being more honest about it, and I get benefits from it there as well. I could go to a conference, like a technical conference, and I can go and speak like a keynote or other type of speaking event, or and I can do that in a really legitimate way. And so A, that gives us a lot more credibility. B, it makes it easier to recruit really top technical talent, because then I can talk to them on their level, and it's like, well, okay, the CEO kind of knows these areas, knows what they're talking about. And so in some senses allow us to punch above our weight like we normally would in terms of the type of talent that we can recruit and attract and everything. Because most CEOs, they can't do that. They can't just go into like a technical conference and make those type of presentations, but I can. And so rather than pretend that I'm somebody I'm not, then it's rather just double down on the things that I'm good at, and then definitely. And turn those into strengths. And so that there are examples of very highly successful CEOs that were founder CEOs who were technical, who then went on to grow and their company and become widely successful. And there's a handful of them that about there as well. And so I think that but don't shy away from the fact, if you have to forge your own path. It's better to
Right.
just be authentic and like with yourself, and then not pretend to be someone that you're not.
That's surprising to me that people actually encouraged you to remove the PhD. How did that feel? I mean, and how many people told you that?
No, I mean, I think this was, look, the truth is when you're doing fundraising, when you're
Yeah.
kind of looking at these, like they're typically doing pattern matching and they're looking for, have I seen something like this before? And like, does this feel familiar in some way? And so, you know, they, and there's a particular kind of mold. I mean, like I check some of the boxes there in terms of like,
Sure.
okay, my background was like at MIT and Stanford and, you know, and like technical founder is a positive. Once you hit a certain scale, there's like, in some cases, people like there's an impression that, oh, okay, well, a technical founder can only take it so far, and then like, are
Right.
they going to be able to scale into like, into other areas? I think that like you don't, as a founder, you don't have to be individually the best at every single thing. You have to it is important to have some type of superpowers, like where
Sure.
like, you're better than what other people are. But like you also have to think about like you're going to complement yourself with people with different skill sets there as well. So you don't have to yourself be the best at everything, but you do have to be able to then inspire people and recruit and inspire people to then to very good people to join your vision and do the best that they can.
It sounds like you've had a lot of opportunity. You know, you mentioned that you were once a founder, a CTO, now co-founder and CEO. Can you describe, and I'm sure it's different based on the company and all of that, but just from an overview level, can you describe the differences between each of those roles and what each of them is thinking the most about?
Yeah, very different. I mean, if I think about like, the days as a CTO, I mean, even, CTO in an early stage company has a lot of responsibility, but I mean, ultimately, the roles end up being very different. The CTO, like at the end of the day, when as a CTO, I could usually go home and feel like, okay, I've made a dent. Like I've
Cross
got a
something
lot
off the
accomplished
to-do
today.
list. Yeah.
Okay, things are under control. When you're a CEO, like everything eventually just falls to you. And so
Sure.
no matter how much you do, you always have the feeling that you're not doing nearly enough. And it's like, maybe I've finished, 1% of what needs to get done, and there's 99% of the stuff which like, you really feel like is not getting done. The other piece is that when you're a CTO, then maybe it's a little bit less about people management and like enabling other people to be to be the best that they can be. It's a little bit more about individual contribution or kind of contribution as like a technical leader. When you're a CEO, then that becomes the most important thing. Is that are you able to recruit and retain and keep motivated like an all-star team?
Sure.
Through all of this. So then much more of the time is spent on managing people, managing teams, recruiting, all of those aspects of it, because there's a set of things that you can do as, that if you're involved, in some particular role in the company, there's a set of things that there's a list of people who could accomplish that and do it. There is also a list of things that as CEO only you can do. And it doesn't, you can't delegate to anyone else. And
What are those items?
No, I mean, these are things involving like, the vision of the company, keeping everybody very well aligned and rowing, in the same direction. Then these involves things like some of the like high level customer relations, and investments and, and strategy and vision. I mean, if you, if you are delegating those type of pieces out, then you're probably not, you're doing your company a disservice.
Sure.
These are the things that you as CEO should be focusing on. And
yeah, and so like there's a lot of stuff there. So like, as the company grows and scales, you'll find yourself being less and less involved in the operational aspect. But the good news is that you can usually hire people who are good at some of the day-to-day operations, sure, allowing you to focus on some of the longer term things, or things that only the you as a founder and CEO can do.
That makes sense. Well, what are you focused on as CEO and co-founder of Unify ID right now?
Yeah, so part of this is there are big initiatives within the company that are important to achieving our next set of goals. Goals around customers, goals around fundraising, goals around growth, and then it's less so much about me myself doing the work for that. It's like we have now hit the stage of the company where it's much more important that I am making sure that everyone else is well aligned and they know what the direction is that we should be going, and there's no barriers or roadblocks to them being successful. Because when in the early days, when it's just 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 people maybe,
right,
your individual contribution makes a big difference. As it is right now, we're up to close to 30 people now. This at that scale, then it becomes more important that I am enabling the rest of the team to be productive, because even if I individually could jump in and do some things, number one, that's not even sustainable. It's not sustainable for me to go and jump in and write code. It's not sustainable for me to go and jump in and do a bunch of things on the marketing side, sure, or sales development. You do what you need to do to make us successful. But that's not a great solution if the CEO is having to jump into those kinds.
Absolutely.
It's much better to be, at this type of phase of the company, it's much better to enable other people to be able to then take on those type of responsibilities.
That makes sense. And what challenges is Unify ID solving?
Yeah, so we do we do authentication. We can authenticate people based on their behavior, like the way that they walk, or these unique aspects to their behavior. And it's much better than using passwords or other forms of authentication, like two-factor codes, or other things which have a lot of friction, as well as don't add that much security and are very annoying to the end user. So this is really about the next generation of authentication. In the future, it's going to be much more things will be much more seamless and much more secure. You won't have to really think about what's my password, these type of things. Effectively, you'll be able to be yourself, and then there's enough that's unique about you that's
a relief.
Sensor data, given all the sensor data in people's lives, and with phones and wearables and et cetera, they many of these interactions become much more seamless. And so most of the customers that we work with today are ones that care about security but also care about user experience.
Yeah, I can only imagine how important. Well, security is always important, no matter who you are or what time you're in. But I can only imagine how much it's become even more important now, as everything is digital first, remote first. How have you been able to lead your team to adapt to the changes that we've been experiencing here in the world?
Yeah, one piece is internally we've shifted, from basically everybody working on site, here every day, to a model. For a while, everybody was completely work from home, so we had 100% remote. Now it's still, at this point, it's around 70% remote still today. That's where we are today. The team has made that transition very well, and adapted well for that transition, which is great. So that's so internally we've had some of our own challenges. Externally as well, there's things have really changed over the last few months, just because of COVID and everything else.
I mean, on the one side, there's been a significant slowdown is just in all economic activity, basically things where they have projects where, you know, we are interacting and engaged in these projects. And then all of a sudden, you know, there's, you know, people are worried about how do I work from home and, you know, what do I do about childcare and like these type of things where a lot of things got what called paused. It was almost like we had this 2-month pause of where not much was happening either on the customer side or on the fundraising side. On the other side, we're seeing a lot of opportunities because, you know, I mentioned around the authentication that technology that we have more people working remotely now. There's increased need for remote authentication. The number of attacks has increased substantially, you know, five times as many attacks, like in terms of cyber attacks, 9 times as many, you know, phishing type of attacks.
Wow.
Like all of these, you know, in the age of COVID, you know, like, you know, these type of malware attacks where it's like you'll get an email attachment. Nowadays, the email attachment often says something related to COVID or other these other things. You know, there's just a dramatic increase on that side. And then at the same time, you know, some of the other solutions like Face ID or Touch ID or some of these that you may use on your mobile device, they're become, you know, their limitations are now becoming more exposed. I mean, when you are wearing a mask, guess what? You know, facial recognition doesn't work, right? When you're wearing gloves, okay, you can't use Touch ID anymore. So there has been an increased interest in, you know, using these additional forms of authentication. And this is not just a blip. I mean, this is like the society is changing. This is, you know, this is not going to be, you know, hey, next month, everything is going to be back to normal. There's going to be, been a seismic shift that has happened in technology and the way that people do business.
It's accelerated a lot of what you're building and so many other things. I absolutely agree. This is definitely the new normal. So we might as well get used to it and start making some things to help us along the way.
Yeah, and there's near-term challenges, you know, in terms of like making it through, you know, the current economic climate, you know, but then there's huge opportunity on the other side. And if you look at like the other times where you know, that I've been through where we've seen these type of things, you know, if you think about 2008 to 2009 to 2010, like, you know, the last time we had the financial crisis, or even back in 2000, I mean, this was, you know, and then if you look at, you know, the number of great companies that were founded and really got started in traction during those years, like in, you know, 2001, 2002, and also like 2009 to 2010, there's a lot of really great companies that were born out of that. And so I think like this is, you know, right now it's a really great time of opportunity for entrepreneurs because people are, I mean, we see this socially as well. I mean, people are now using this opportunity to rethink the way that we do that our institutions work. You know, I mean, I think you see this with Black Lives Matter. I think you see this with, you know, with on the technology side as well. And so, you know, smart investors are they are using times like this to look for these types of opportunities.
Yeah, I'm with you. And what you're saying is really inspiring. I can only imagine how many people who are trying to start their next venture, or young adults who maybe are graduating college or just even going into college, are trying to understand where to go and may feel discouraged by what's going on. Can you shine a little bit of light? You know, you sound very optimistic and you have a lot of opportunities in front of you. How would you advise somebody who's maybe feeling a little bit stuck right now to overcome and get back in there?
Yeah, I mean, the natural tendency for people in these type of situations is to be conservative. I mean, it's like, you know, I really need my stable job. Let me stay at like a larger organization, a larger company. Let me not join a startup because, you know, I'm worried about, you know, like economic stability. You know, you're doing yourself a disservice in these cases. I mean, regardless of who you are, you know, if you have the confidence to be able to then and the perspective to be able to then say, you know what, like I'm not that worried about like being able to get a job.
I mean, even if the economy goes bad, guess what? Like, if the economy goes bad, some of the bigger companies, they're going to do mass layoffs anyway.
Yeah.
Right? And so
we've experienced that. We've seen that.
Yeah. And so in some senses, you're not actually taking that much more risk. And then if the economy is actually not that bad, then you could always go back to join one of those larger organizations there as well. So, but I mean, I think that there's a natural tendency for humans just to, in these type of uncertain times, to then fall back and become a little bit more conservative. And it's kind of like if you are able to overcome that and then kind of do the opposite, then that's where there's going to be a lot more opportunity there. Right. I think the other thing I'll say is that I've seen just things on the investment side, again, because there were areas where there were groups that were historically overlooked, in terms of female-led companies, or from minority, based on minorities and others, where I think that in terms of the investment community had not they've been underserved, and there were hidden gems in those in those type of companies that now, because of what we're seeing in some of the social changes that are happening, are people are now taking a fresh look at some of these opportunities. So I think it's also, whereas historically there may have been a little bit more more difficulty on that side.
Sure.
We see more VCs and more investors who are committing to investing in talking with more Black-owned businesses and or female-owned founders, things like that. And this is not, from what I've seen, this is in the past there's been lip service about it. Now I'm actually seeing starting to see change. Yeah. And this is it's good not just from the moral imperative side. It's also good from a business sense. I mean, there's some great companies and really hidden gems there that investors that do this will get a better return because if they're looking in places that other investors aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, this is ultimately, if you are an investor, if you're just doing what everybody else is doing, you're not going to win. If you're just a follower, you're just not going to win. And many times, investors, it's about pattern matching, just looking for certain patterns. The ones that can be a little bit more forward thinking and then break out of that are going to be the ones that are going to be successful. And so I think there's a great opportunity as well, even if you don't have a traditional background, you don't have, you don't necessarily fit that mold. Now's the time to move forward and try it. Yeah.
Seize the opportunity. Yeah. I love that, especially, to your point, while probably a majority of people are taking that conservative lens, it's creating such an opportunity for others who want to get out there and for others to start shaping this new normal and being those new voices that maybe we've been lacking. So I totally agree with what you have to say there. I think that's important. I have a question specifically about entrepreneurs in tech and software development. The developer space seems so important right now. What advice do you have for those types of entrepreneurs, specifically those trying to break into security?
Yeah, I mean, this is what, talking about shifts that we had made, that was kind of coinciding with COVID as well. I mean, we had already seen the writing on the wall of things moving towards a more developer focus. I mean, security is a little bit more of a holdout. I mean, there's other areas where, the decision makers have been, often been developers. Security traditionally is a little bit more conservative, around, the more typical model, especially with kind of larger enterprises, is that, these type of policies are dictated from, the CIO or the CISO or these type of things. And then there's less individual decisions made. That is changing. These pieces are absolutely changing. We've already seen it in many other fintech, areas, and other areas of the stack. So now, so there's a tremendous opportunity there. And then if I think that any company now, that is looking at providing any of this type of B2B, whether it's in security or other areas, should take a hard look at what is your
plan for reaching developers, because more and more, like, the new world that we're in is that even other areas like marketing, like PR, like they're basically, everybody is becoming developers, and sales as well. Like, and so if you're not serving a developer market, even if it's, you're not, your product is not traditionally like a software tool that developers use, you have to have that mindset, because everything is becoming software, and largely, like, all of these roles are becoming, in essence, developer roles.
Totally.
And so, just thinking about the tools to enable these type of things becomes very important, and how you're going to reach them. And it's a little bit different. Like, this is not a typical, like, kind of top down type of, let me go and influence this, like, particular individual within the organization,
right?
And then they're going to be able to push the stuff through. This is you have to think about it a little bit more in bottoms up. You also have to think about the BS-o-meter for developers and kind of these individuals is it's much more refined, and so you have to be more honest and more authentic. You can't it's a little bit less like salesy,
right?
Type of approach.
They'll see right through all that.
Yeah, they do, and like they'll have a healthy dose of skepticism around things that, like, offers that are free, or like there's things that's like, well, where's the strings attached, and like, do I actually believe this, and like, because like they're, so many of these individuals are they're either when they're being sold to, they having a very overt sales process is not the right approach. You want to basically treat them in a much more respectful way, and then when you want to be top of mind when they are looking for a solution. Like, you're looking for a solution to a problem like yours, right? And if you're able to position yourself and your brand in that way, then you'll be successful in that type of world.
Well, I feel like in the future we're gonna have a quote from you saying that the developers are eating the world, and we'll see that. So here we go. We're making history right here. Before we leave, I have one more question. You touched on it a little bit earlier. You mentioned the future of security with these biometric capabilities. I'm definitely looking forward to that, because I'm someone who constantly is forgetting passwords. What other things can we look forward to in the world of security and software and all of that? What are you forecasting?
I think that we've seen this trend in general just across technology, where like the hard part of technology is not the technology part, it's actually the human element, the human piece. And so, if you look at, and there's many examples of this where, there's limitations to technology. I would put passwords in this bucket there as well, where because of the limitations of technology, humans have to then adapt to the limitations of technology. And it's very hard to change human behavior. And so what you'll see is technology, like the pace of advancement is such that, instead of humans having to adapt to the limitation of technology, technology will then come and meet humans where they are. And so, like, you see this with things like speech recognition, for example. If in the early days, speech recognition didn't really work. It was like, you had to wear a special headset, and like it would only work, kind of maybe 90% of the time.
Very clunky. Yeah,
very clunky. Not, and now, like, because the technology has now reached the point where I can say, hey Siri, what's the weather today, or anything like that, and then they will. And it works. It's still not perfect. By absolutely not perfect, but these are now ways that previously we didn't have that way of interacting with technology, and now we do, right? And so you're going to see this more and more happen just across the board. In the context of authentication, you'll see this in terms of authentication just becoming much more seamless, much more continuous. Not so much like, here's my piece of plastic where I have my my 10-year-old photo on it with a mag stripe, and then that's how I'm going to pay for things. Like, it's going to be, these things are going to be much more natural. You're going to walk into your bank. Your bank is going to, greet you by name. Wow. You're going to ask, let's say, oh, can I have $200? And they're going to say, oh, here you go. And like, you're not going to, like, the whole
thing around like, okay, swipe your piece of plastic, type in your 4-digit PIN.
Right.
Those are going to change. The travel is going to change a lot. The way shopping brick and mortar is going to change. It's going to become much more just much more human, much more natural, and much more human, like these type of interactions.
That sounds good.
Because that's and then this is going to happen just across the board, where instead of us having to adapt to the limitation of technology is going to reach the point where it's going to be able to then meet us where we are, and then allow humans to just have a much more natural interaction with technology.
That's awesome. The future is definitely looking bright. I'm can't wait for all of those to come about, especially with everything going on in the world today. Typing in those keys every time I go to the grocery store or the bank, I'm like, do I really want to touch this right now? I don't know. So all of that contactless stuff that can come as soon as it's ready, send it our way.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To hear more, check out our website, badassesintech.com, and join our community. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud, so follow us and tune in next week. That about sums it up. I'm Summer Falgiano, and this is Badasses in Tech.